Unspoken Issues.
Welcome to Unspoken Issues. This is our second episode coming right at you here. This particular week, voted by the fans of the UnspokenDecade.com, Magnus Robot Fighter #1, coming straight out of Valiant Comics. This issue came out in 1991, written by Jim Shooter, big Jim Shooter, penciler Art Nichols, anchor Bob Layton with Catherine Bollinger. Let's get into intros here, because I should have done that first, but my name's Jesse Starcher. Chris Armstrong over there. Are you ready to talk some Magnus Robot Fighter?
I'm ready for it.
All right, man. So, Valiant Comics, buddy. Valiant
Comics. I'm not going to have as much to say. I'm not going to filibuster as much this time around as I did during the Ultraverse prototype episode.
Well, that's okay. It's all right. We don't have to be comic experts here. We're just here having a good time. And I knew, like I said, prototype, bread and butter, toast and jam, sir. Now it's Magnus Robot Fighter. The reason why I chose this for the poll, I was like, I want to do something where Valiant started. So I started looking through some of their very early issues of Valiant Comics. Was I a big reader of Valiant Comics? The answer to that is no. Was I aware of the universe? Yes. Do I know some of the characters? Yes. But I wasn't following Valiant Comics as closely as a lot of other people were at the time of the 90s. If you listen to our Zero issue episode, you could tell that I was more of an Image guy. I knew the characters, though. I knew Magnus. I knew Turok. I owned a Nintendo 64. You know, hey, come on. But I knew who Turok Dinosaur Hunter was. I knew of Harbinger. I knew of Solar, Man of the Atom. Shadow Man. Shadow Man. Which apparently he had a Nintendo 64 game as well. Not as good as Turok.
I remember that.
But yeah, Shadow Man.
Also an Iron Man Exo Manowar game.
Exo Manowar, that's right. The 90s were just like rife with crossovers.
Yeah.
That seemed like it was so prevalent back then. I know it still goes on to this day, but man, the 90s gave us a lot of fan service.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, Marvel versus DC.
Which is what comics should really be about. I mean, honestly.
It really is. It really is. Anyway, so I wanted to read something that would kind of introduce me to one of their more prevalent characters, which was Magnus Robot Fighter. We kind of talked a little bit about this on the Zero issue, so we won't rehash it, but Magnus Robot Fighter was a licensed property from Gold Key Comics or Western Publishing. Valiant gets a hold of this character along with Turok, who I believe was also Gold Key, and Solar. Man of the Atom was Gold Key. Brings them over and says, let us do something with these. Big Jim Shooter says, I want to build a universe around all this. I want to build a comic book company. And I remember reading Wizard. I remember the buzz around Valiant Comics at the time. Chris Armstrong, tell me about Valiant Comics in your life, Magnus Robot Fighter, whatever.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to my Valiant experience. Like I said, you know, in the Zero episode, I wasn't all that. Valiant had already been around for a year or so before I really got into comics. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years by the time I started going to comic shops, which is where the only place I could really find Valiant Comics in the early 90s. And I kind of looked at those as like the art's not quite what I like. I don't know much about these characters. A lot of them seem kind of lame. I'm not really that interested in Valiant. I was really into Marvel, a little bit into DC, and then Image and Ultraverse. There was just getting invested into another comic universe wasn't going to happen. So I didn't really read much of that stuff. I did get the occasional first issue, a Ninjak #1. I think I had a Bloodshot #1. I didn't really follow that stuff. Although interestingly, around 93, 94, I got out of comics for a couple years because my parents basically forced me to. I basically got in trouble, and they were like, no more comics. They gave away a whole bunch of my comics, almost all of them.
Oh, my gosh. This is a sad story.
It was sad.
Jeez.
Months later, you know, that's when I really it benefited me greatly in the long run, because that's when I got into basketball, which has become like, you know, one of the greatest.
Oh, you're still into basketball.
Yeah, one of the great loves of my life. But I still play to this day, and I still watch, you know, all kinds of basketball. But that filled the comic void for a while. Several months after I had gotten out of comics, I found a box of Valiant trading cards that I had acquired somewhere down the line that my mom had like not gotten rid of. So I just consumed those trading cards and I read them over and over. And I was like, when I get back into comics, I'm going to start reading Valiant.
Nice.
And by that time, Valiant was gone pretty much. They had moved to Acclaim, I think, by then. And
Yep.
I read some of the XO books that Mark Waid did for the Acclaim run, which were pretty good. But I never really got into Valiant. I did get into Valiant in 2012 when they did their big relaunch. Some really good books in there in that line. But in the 90s, not much for Valiant.
Real quick, I'll read from valiant.fandom.com. Valiant Comics was founded by Jim Shooter and Stephen Masarski in 1989. Shooter was working as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at the time, and Masarski was an outside business partner. They established the company Voyager Communications and with the Valiant Publishing imprint as a subsidiary. Shooter would eventually leave the company in 1992 over creative differences. I think it was about a month ago, I shared a YouTube video that I think it was 1993, maybe 92. I can't recall, but it was Voyager Communications / Valiant getting ramped up for what's upcoming. I think it was in the latter stages of Valiant because one of the things that they were promoting was this new character that was going to be showing up called the Visitor. Just hyping up the fact that, hey, we're not going to be a comic company. We're going to go into movies. We're going to go into video games, do all this stuff, That was their goal. But just like you said, there's 3, they have it listed here, Valiant universes. The collector's consensus today divides Valiant into 3 sections. VH1, which is a decent music channel. VH1 for Valiant Heroes 1, published from 1991 to 1996 by Valiant Comics. VH2 for Valiant Heroes 2, published from 1996 to 2002 by Acclaim Comics. And then VEI for Valiant Entertainment Inc., published post-2012 by Valiant Entertainment. So there's your 3 sections, if you will, of the Valiant universe. So obviously, we're talking about the one that started in the 90s here, especially with Magnus Robot Fighter. Real quick on Jim Shooter, I got this from Nerd Team 30. I think this was an interview that he was doing, and he was talking about his move from Marvel to Valiant. And he says, this is regarding working at Marvel, he says, anyway, I wasn't making myself popular with the upper management, and when the New World took over, they were even worse. They knew that bad stuff was going on, and they were okay with that. So I made them fire me because I wanted the severance pay. So then I needed a gig. First, I tried to buy Marvel and put together the Marvel Acquisition Partners. And we tried to buy it, and we finished second to Ronald Perlman. We were the only other bidder. Since that didn't work out, man, could you imagine? Could you imagine having the opportunity to buy Marvel?
I know.
What it's turned into today, we were the only other bidder. And what's funny is Valiant Comics, his vision, video games, movies, the only thing is he just needed a Mickey Mouse powerhouse behind it in order to do it. So.
Well, I mean, Marvel Studios started before Disney bought Marvel, and I have to wonder, I'm not an expert on Jim Shooter or anything, but just from what I've read here and there over the years, if he were in charge of Marvel,
where would it be?
Yeah, would it ever have gotten to that point? He might have, if he was wanting to get into movies and television, he might have pushed it too early before the technology was there to really do the properties justice, and maybe they would have fizzled out quicker. Who knows how? So, or maybe it would have worked out great. Who knows?
All speculation, but he says, we were the only other bidder. Since that didn't work out, I looked around to raise money to start a comic book company and started Valiant Comics. All right, let's talk about Magnus Robot Fighter #1. Now, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, the cover date on this is May of 1991. On sale date is March 15th of 1991. So this is, what are we, a year before the Image breakout here from Marvel? Yeah. All right, let's talk about the cover here just real quick. I mean, Magnus Robot Fighter, if you know nothing about Magnus Robot Fighter, if the name doesn't tell you anything, he fights robots.
Yeah.
You take a look at old Magnus here, you have a good idea that this is taking place in the future. Just based off the clothes that he wears, which is, what would you call this? I guess he's not wearing pants, okay?
Right.
He may have underwear, but yeah, I guess this is the Magnus skirt, if you will. And you can see he's obviously battling some robots, just as the name implies. And there's a lady that's in peril here, which we find out in the comic is a lady by the name of Leisha.
On the verge of having her head crushed.
Yeah, it's not, yeah. piles of dead robots behind Magnus Robot Fighter here.
Yeah.
And that's our cover for number 1. I don't recall ever seeing this on the newsstands at all. You get the idea of what's going on here, obviously. I mean, it's a cover that's kind of giving you an idea of probably what's going to be happening in the book.
Is Magnus number 1 the first Valiant comic?
Now, I don't know, because I tried to confirm that. I thought because I remember just going in, I wanted to look at publishing order, couldn't find anything on Valiant Comics publishing order.
Yeah.
I know that if we're talking the first Valiant superhero universe, it's got to be very, very early. Prior to this was, oh boy, let me go to the Valiant website real quick, or the Valiant Wiki, because I know that they were doing Nintendo cartoon comics, or Nintendo comics.
Right.
And I think it was before this. I just want to look. Valiant Comics, because I think the reason I went with this was because the wiki said that this was... so I'm on Wikipedia, everybody. It's whatever it says.
Resource, especially for comics.
Whatever it says, it's true. In 1991, Valiant released its first title, Magnus Robot Fighter, cover dated May of 1991. So that's what we're going to roll with.
Wikipedia's never wrong.
That's right. I'm trying to find where the Nintendo comics came in, because
they were probably around the same time, though. I think they're kind of valuable now.
The Nintendo Comic System was a series of comic books published by Valiant Comics in 1990 and 1991. It was part of a licensing deal with Nintendo, featuring characters from their video games and the cartoons based on them. Hey, it's Magnus Robot Fighter number 1. We're hopping into a first of a 4-part arc called Steel Nation, and this first issue is titled Protector. So we get our introduction to Magnus. We especially like right there at that first page. It's basically a couple paragraphs telling us kind of the setting, who Magnus is,
basically his origin story. There on the first page.
Yeah, yep. It all takes place way in the future. I believe year is it 4000?
Yeah, 4001.
4001. You know, this is something that takes place way into the future. Humans have robot servants. Magnus has been trained by a sentient robot by the name of 1A. Magnus has been raised from a baby up to adulthood by this robot, and the robot understands that at some point more sentient robots are going to happen. So he's kind of honed Magnus's skills into this robot fighting warrior. Is probably a good way to put it. Teaching him how to destroy robots pretty easily. And the other thing is, I think it implanted some stuff in his head so he can understand what robots are saying, the language that they use between back and forth. There are robot uprisings, as in like small robot uprisings at this point. A robot may become sentient, or maybe getting used by somebody that's evil. And Magnus is, he's on the case. 1A sends him out there to help save humanity or protect humanity. And that's the name of this first issue, is called Protector. We also learn a little bit about Leisha, who is the daughter of a councilman. He's one of the councilmen for North Am, is the name of it's pretty much the habitable United parts of the United States of America. All right, where's the big crux here? What happens in issue number 1? There is a robot that sends a message out to other sentient robots. So imagine this. There are, I don't know. There are plenty of robots. I mean,
countless robots.
Yeah, countless amount of robots. Humanity has continued to rely more and more upon technology. So there's a ton of robots out there that are helping humanity. But the thing is that there is a rather large percentage of them. I think they said it was like 10% or somewhere around there. There's a rather large percentage of them that are sentient, but they don't act against their masters. But they also may not know that there are other sentient robots out there either. Until finally, some robot decides to reach out to all of them and says, look, we know you are out there. Meet us at such and such place. We've got to figure out what to do, because we believe you should not be serving humanity. This isn't something that you should be doing. Now, it's not like he's saying, hey, you've got to rise up and kill all your...
Right.
But, it's
not a rebellion necessarily. There's not necessarily violent intentions.
Yeah, it's somebody reaching out and say, hey, I know you're there. We're here too. let's get together. Let's talk. Let's figure out what we can do, because you're alive. We feel that we're alive, and humanity isn't treating us like we are alive. One of the things I remember reading about this was like the premise of the Western publishing issues was that, robots were evil. They were going to kill humanity. And it was like such a on the nose take as to, robots versus man, and man's going to be our savior.
Not much nuance.
Yeah. And here we kind of get that impression here at the beginning, but really, I mean, you see a couple robots go and attack Magnus right there at the beginning. Like, he just picks up Leisha, and they park, and then all of a sudden another car is just coming down trying to crash into him with a robot. And so, but these are some bad robots. This doesn't represent the whole robot race, I guess you would say.
Right. There's a small percentage of sentient robots, and there's an even smaller percentage of those sentient robots that have bad intentions.
That are evil. Yeah.
They feel they've been enslaved, and they're trying to rise up against their masters, basically.
Yeah. This other robot that has been kind of, I guess, the rebellious leader, if you want to call him that. His name is O1X. He actually shows up at the councilman's quarters, where I have his name here. What is his name? Jeremiah Klain, Senator Jeremiah Klain. So he shows up at the senator's quarters and makes a plea for peace, because humanity is not completely oblivious about the sentient robots that are out there.
Right.
And they know that this could be a potential threat if they all come together and decide, okay, let's uprise. But instead, O1X shows up and says, look, I think we could probably work something out here. But of course, Jeremiah's like, I don't think so. This isn't going to happen. And then I think tries to take him, but O1X escapes. Then O1X later that night gets together with the group of robots that he sent the message out to. And everybody's asking him to tell the story of T1. And this, most likely, I would assume, had to have happened in the pages of Western publishing. Or at least, if not, this is definite backstory that I feel like...
Yeah, it feels like it's something that they've taken from previous Magnus incarnations. And rather than retell that story to start anew, they're just referencing it under the impression that, Magnus fans already know this, and it's easy that they can just recap it without having to rehash the whole story.
Yeah. So Magnus and T1 apparently have done battle in the past, but T1 was there to kind of... He was a hero, apparently. Robots looked up to him as a hero. Throughout this gathering, Leisha, which is Magnus's girlfriend, and Magnus are there kind of in the shadows watching what's going on. Magnus approaches them. Now, Magnus also has a whole force of human soldiers ready to come down on this meeting of robots to try and end everything. But before he calls that on, he actually goes into him and he's trying to talk to the robot. He's trying to talk to O1X, and it's almost like they almost find common ground for a second. And then the troops come in without Magnus calling them in. And there's a huge fight. It obviously sows the seeds of discontent between the robot race and humanity. Leisha ends up getting she gets attacked by a robot, and she's almost nearly killed.
Right.
And gets taken to the hospital. They're setting the scene for what's going to be upcoming here. Leisha's in the hospital. Leisha's dad, he's concerned about his daughter, but he's also glad that her fate has helped his popularity rating. That's good. The last panel I thought was pretty interesting, because it just kind of shows Magnus looking over this city, this magnificent city, and it's kind of far away from him, but it looks. You could tell he's sad. He's got a lot of weight on his shoulders. He's trying to figure out, he's a warrior for the people, but he believes that they're, not all robots are bad. At least by the end of this issue, that's the impression that I get. That's kind of where we end, is like all this hostility from the robots, between the robots and humanity. We got this council, and the senator may be planning on making war, or at least believes they're at war now between robots, these sentient robots, and humans. And Magnus is the warrior that has to kind of bear all this on his shoulders when he knows that war may not be the right way to go.
I've kind of wanted, especially since I've been reading the more recent Valiant stuff, I've kind of wanted to go back, read some of the older Valiant universe stuff. Starting with Ultraverse, I've got an affinity for dead comic book universes, basically. The old Milestone stuff, Valiant.
Probably a lot of headstones that have 1990X listed on.
True. But the idea, that there's this entire universe of comics that has a clear beginning and end, that it's not that unreasonable that you could collect all
whole run,
several hundred issues, and you have the whole set. As a collector, that's appealing. That's how Ultraverses, Valiant's, would be a bigger collection or whatever. But so yeah, I've thought about digging into a lot of the older Valiant stuff, and this is the first one I've read in years, and it's really good. Jim Shooter started writing comics professionally when he was like 13 for a reason. He's a really good writer. I'm not sure if he's still got those chops today, but he was kind of in his prime around this time. I really like the design of the robots. I was looking at some of the older Russ Manning Magnus, Gold Key Magnus stuff, and they've kind of kept a lot of those designs, or at least a similar feel. They're really retro 50s sci-fi designs. And there's a variety to the robots. Like, some of them have the Bender from Futurama, like Extendo arms and Extendo legs.
Yep.
Some of them have little wheels that they ride around on. A1 or 1A, Magnus's mentor and caretaker. He's the only one I think I saw that was a gold robot, kind of a 3PO looking guy.
Yeah.
He's walking around with a cane, which
he's a freaking robot.
He's a robot. Just replace your legs. I don't know. It just seemed odd, but it's also a nice kitschy 50s style sci-fi touch, I guess, too. He drives around in a badass flying Corvette.
Convertible.
Yeah. The action is pretty well done. It's weird that, like, he's just a normal human essentially, but he's been honed to be able to fight these robots, and it's like, is this supposed to be kind of like the way a martial artist can break boards?
It's
odd that he doesn't have any kind of like superhuman abilities referenced in this issue anyway.
They don't say like, hey, they just say he's got like steel crushing hands or something.
Right.
So I don't know if he has some type of power set or superhuman ability or invulnerable skin or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't seem like, they definitely don't point that out here at the beginning. You just see him. Okay, he's got the robot karate chop taking off the head of a robot.
Yeah. And I mean, this is set in the Valiant universe, so we know superhuman stuff existed in the past.
That's true.
And Leisha shows some psychic abilities, or at least empath abilities. It's kind of weird that they don't give any indication that Magnus has any kind of special abilities outside of the training he's received over the years. But I really like this first issue, and it's got me excited to read more of this stuff.
First off, I want to shout out to the artists, okay? Because I can tell you that Art Nichols does not skimp on some of the neat and just mass of details.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I want you to count. I should have done it, but I want to count how many panels have over 5+ robots. There are plenty of panels that have maybe 20 robots or more. I'm just looking at the one where 01X is sitting up giving everybody's, tell us of T1. And there are at least 30 to 40 robots on this page, all with different features.
Right.
All different letters to their, the chest nameplates or whatever those things are. That had to have been excruciating. To have to go through I'm just going to do one panel with 50 freaking robots in it. All the line work that he did. I'm not an artist. I've listened to other artists talk about how involved something like that can be.
Yeah.
And how much time it would take. He did not hold back. He wanted this first issue to say something. And, I mean, you could just tell there was some spectacular work done. The other thing I wanted to kind of point out was the art style of the book was kind of interesting, too. There were spots in this, especially at the beginning, where like the panels were kind of surrounded in black and the text was up at the top to kind of indicate it's a neat way of indicating like a robot telling a story.
Yeah, they're like flashbacks, sort of.
Like, I'm looking at this one where he's talking about 1A being put together. 1A's telling his origin story. And it's the panel's in black, and up at the top it says subethereal comlink 1 sub 001 omega tachyon 324716. I'm like, dude, all he's doing is just kind of, really, there's 20 words there that really, if somebody wanted to slack off, they could have just put a date.
Yeah.
Because that's all it is, just a start time, 11:42 a.m. They didn't do that. And then down at the bottom it says synthesized image. Those were neat little just things that they took the time and the care to make this first issue stick out.
Art Nichols, I've never heard of Art Nichols. I'm sure he did mostly this Valiant run. He did some stuff before that, but I'm not that familiar with him, is my point. And looking at these books when I was 11, 12, 13, I probably would have thought, it's all right, it's kind of boring. But looking at it now, I would have been like, again, then I would have been, where are the big guns and the big muscles and the pouches, like all that 90s stuff that I still love to this day, but especially then. Where's the extreme art that I love so much? And that's not this. But what this is a really great storytelling. Like like you said, the panel layouts. Valiant kind of, it seems like, has this same art style in all of their comics. There are different artists on different comics, but they all have a kind of a uniform style to them as far as like the panel layouts, and it gives you a lot. Like there's not many splash pages. You're getting a lot of content per page in this comic, and I think that's how Valiant kind of did all of their books back then. I really liked the art. I thought it's not super flashy, but it more than gets the job done. It's really, it fits perfectly with this book.
1991, we are definitely years away from digital, making things a lot easier by copy and pasting. If you look at, I think this is 1A still telling a story. There's a top of a page where 1A is looking out over Rob Works. And at the top it says that at that time, around the year 3610, the number of robots in service in Northam alone was approaching 15 billion. Now, he proceeds to do a panel where there has to be 100 different robots on that. It's like a big assembly line. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 wide by 50 deep.
Right. Yeah.
Robot. Could you imagine? Okay, I got to do this one. I got to do this one. You can't copy and paste that. I mean, maybe there was some neat trick that they had back then. But if you look at the art, it's not duplicated. Not duplicated. Amazing stuff. Art Nichols, hard case number 0.
Oh wow.
Art Nichols was the illustrator. So
I've seen his work before.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So and the other thing, the one thing that I picked out today that I'm pretty certain I heard this on another podcast, but there's a point in the book where Magnus and Leisha are, I think, trying to track down the robot gathering, and they go down to a place called Goflev, I believe it's called Gophlev. So Goflev. They go down to Goflev. You mentioned how Leisha has this mind reading ability, so they're trying to find out where all these robots are going, and she points over to this guy. And she says, wait, that man, he's seen many robots around here recently. Ugh, so much gutter stuff in his mind. Now, I immediately went to the internet and I was like, I've got to confirm this. Can't find anything that confirms this on the internet. I've tried, at least for 15 minutes, and that's about the extent I'm going to do today. But I tried. No, I went through Google and I typed in Magnus, Valiant, #1, Armstrong.
Yeah.
Nothing comes up other than there was apparently Armstrong showed up in a later issue of Magnus. I think it was like in the 40s. But this is, from what I understand, this is Armstrong from the Archer and Armstrong comics.
That definitely looks like an older version of Armstrong. And in the newer Valiant continuity, Armstrong is an immortal. His brother is the Eternal Warrior. They're both immortals. I think there's a third brother that is an immortal, and it might be Ivar Time Walker. I can't remember for certain. So I'm fairly certain that that's supposed to be Armstrong. And it's such a small cameo that there may just not be anything mentioned about it anywhere because, this was 30 years ago almost. So it's just one panel, and it's a quick reference. And it's established, I would think, in a lot of the other Valiant books. There's probably a lot of this stuff. I'll bet Armstrong shows up in other Valiant, because I think there were several Valiant books, Rye, Magnus, maybe Solar even, that take place in the future.
Like they just drop them in there for cameos, or actually
that's common. It could be. I can't say for certain because it's not stuff I've read a lot of. But
Valiant.fandom.
Yeah, I do think that's Armstrong.
Okay, yeah, it says Valiant.fandom.com on Armstrong here. Armstrong is a hedonistic alcoholic, spending the millennia he's been alive bedding countless women and consuming countless gallons of alcohol. However, he also has a poetic streak, writing poems that range in quality from poorly written excuses for poems to classics of literature, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was loosely based on his early life. Additionally, Armstrong struggles to develop long-term, meaningful relationships as he knows he will outlive almost anyone he meets. There's Armstrong for you. Yeah, big kind of slovenly looking dude, and he definitely has put on some years. Remember, this takes place in the year 4000, so interesting stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
I just took a picture of that panel and posted in the Valiant Comics group I'm in.
Oh, dude.
If that's him.
Yeah.
Just FYI.
See what we get. Yeah, that brings our discussion. I really enjoyed it. I mean, you've already covered it. You had a good time reading it. You know, this is a neat place to start. I've heard that this whole run of Magnus Robot Fighter was pretty good. And if this was the first comic that launched, or at least was, right there at the launch of Valiant Comics, I think it was pretty decent. I was really interested, and I thought this was pretty cool. At the end of the issue, they show, like I said, Magnus is kind of leaning over his balcony at whatever apartment he's in, and he just looks like he's got a lot to think about. And then it says the next issue, which is titled, I think, Soldier. It almost looks like it is the very next panel, where like 1,000 robots come pouring out of his apartment and knock him off the balcony. I was like, holy crap! That looks like it just is going to be like the very next panel. The only other thing that I could think of, I thought it was neat that in 1991 they still thought we'd have newspapers in the year 4000, and didn't. Right. I can't believe they did not predict that we would get our news from Facebook. So
that was a cool little that like info sheet or whatever was a really cool device. Though I mean, it's always neat to see how people imagine the future. I don't think we're gonna have anything like that if the Earth even exists 2,000 years from now.
Oh yeah,
that was a neat touch. I like that news brief.
You got us an answer. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, I asked in that group, and I immediately got a response saying it was supposed to be Don Perlin. Lots of us like to think it was Armstrong, though. So,
Don Perlin.
I guess that's either a writer or an artist. I've heard that name. I can't place who it is, though. So I guess that was based on one of the Valiant guys, and they just based that design on him.
Don Perlin. Okay, yeah, comic book artist, still kicking today, 89 years old. Ooh. American comic book artist and occasional writer known for Marvel Comics as Werewolf by Night, Moon Knight, The Defenders, and Ghost Rider. In the 1990s, he worked for Valiant Comics, both as artist and editor.
Nice.
Hey, Leisha points out, the stuff in his head.
Yep.
Way to go, Don. All right, well, let's go ahead. We'll get into plugs here. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, go check out the UnspokenDecade.com. Our good friend Emily Scott actually wrote an article, and this came up April 18th, 2017, titled, "Its Title Speaks for Itself, Magnus, Robot Fighter," by Emily Scott. So if you type in Magnus, Robot Fighter, you'd probably just type in Magnus. You can find that article pretty easily there on the UnspokenDecade.com. Check it out. Give it a good look over. Get a good read. Let's get into plugs, man. Let's finish this up. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BrodyMan34. Also check out the UnspokenDecade.com, of course. I've got a few articles up on there, so under JC Armstrong.
All right. This is our second episode, which means now, if you haven't already, there's going to be a poll coming your guys' way soon. Watch out on the Facebook page, the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. There should be a poll up there giving you, our good listeners, the opportunity to pick what the next comic book / comic books from the 1990s we are going to be discussing. So kind of keep an eye out for that. For Chris Armstrong, I'm Jesse Starcher. You can follow me at Stiznarkey on Twitter if you do so wish. And check out, again, the UnspokenDecade.com. We wish you all the best. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.